Let's jump right into today's explainer, where we're exploring a truly visceral, historical human drama, one that, fascinatingly enough, becomes the very pattern of divine covenant. This isn't a story built on abstract, lofty theology. It is raw human tension. We're talking about waiting, deep frustration, and some really heavy decisions made under immense pressure. So, what happens when God promises something that reality flat out refuses to produce? It's a stark question, right? But it instantly plunges us into the incredibly high-stakes tension that defines Abraham and Sarah's unbearable wait. This is the story of a promise that just does not arrive when it's expected to. It's about real human beings who have to live inside that excruciating delay, trying not to lose their minds or themselves in the process.
All right, let's look at section 1, the weight of the promise.
To set the scene, Abraham was given this vast, expansive promise of descendants and nations, literally a blessing that would extend to the ends of the earth. But, well, here's the catch. It hinged entirely on the physical impossibility of Sarah bearing a son, because Sarah simply cannot. And time wasn't just passing, it was practically taunting them. As you look at this timeline, you see the promise hanging in the air over days, months, years, and eventually decades, all while the human body just keeps growing older. Abraham can still move around, he's still building altars, still acting outwardly in faith, but Sarah's aging body is acting like a ticking clock on a divine guarantee. Her body is literally the very place where this promise will either be miraculously fulfilled or exposed as completely unreal.
That brings us to section 2. Hagar and the human solution.
So living under the immense pressure of this unfulfilled guarantee, Sarah introduces what was actually a culturally rational solution to her household, her servant, Hagar. In their ancient world, you have to understand, if a wife couldn't provide descendants, achieving the promise through another woman in the household was a totally socially acceptable pragmatic move. Giving Hagar to Abraham wasn't some act of obvious rebellion against God, not at all. It was simply faith attempting to help itself. It was human pragmatism trying to secure a divine promise through available, logical means. So Abraham agrees, and Hagar conceives. But in that exact moment, the entire structure of the household irreversibly fractures. Sarah's theoretical barrenness suddenly becomes undeniably real, standing right there in front of her in the form of another woman's pregnancy.
Ultimately, this pragmatism produces a parallel line. That's a future that exists, sure, but not in the way it was originally promised. The human solution didn't resolve the tension at all. It multiplied it. Hagar, who is now carrying immense biological significance, starts looking at Sarah differently. Sarah experiences this deep humiliation and retaliates, which eventually causes Hagar to flee. What we really learn here is that a solution born from pure human strategy doesn't always produce peace. In fact, it often produces intense, painful division.
Moving right along to section 3, the collision of two sons. Fast forward a few years, and the miraculous birth of Isaac creates an agonizing existential crisis. Because now, we don't just have a parallel line of pregnancy, we have two living, breathing sons occupying the exact same space in Abraham's world. On one hand, you have Ishmael, born from human initiative under intense pressure. On the other, you have Isaac, born from a divine promise completely beyond physical possibility. They are both real, they are both fiercely loved by Abraham. But the defining flashpoint between these two sons, it's not about their human value or their worth, it is entirely about their source.
Now, for section 4.
The painful separation.
All this unresolved tension that had been simmering for years finally hits a boiling point and erupts into a highly visible collision. Sarah sees the older, physically stronger Ishmael interacting with young Isaac in a way that, in her eyes, crosses a major line. Driven by a fierce mother's instinct to protect this child she literally waited decades for, she draws an uncompromising boundary. She says, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave shall not inherit with my son Isaac." She is absolutely not speaking abstract theology here. She is a mother demanding a painful physical separation between two futures. She totally refuses to allow the promise she finally received to be compromised in any way. Now, you might think Sarah's demand is born out of mere spite or malice, but it's really not. In the ancient world, an older son posed a severe, literal, legal threat. According to ancient Near Eastern inheritance laws, succession in a blended household like this was highly contested. The presence of an older, established son, like Ishmael, creates massive legal ambiguity. An ambiguity in this specific context could very easily lead to conflict, displacement, or even the violent elimination of the younger son, Isaac.
So Abraham is understandably caught in this agonizing middle ground. It's an impossible situation. Yet God steps in and actually affirms Sarah's protective instinct through a dual movement, recognizing that something deeply true is being protected here. First, Isaac is preserved specifically within the line of promise. But crucially, and we can't miss this, Ishmael is not abandoned. He is preserved within God's broader care and is promised his very own future as a nation. The separation is incredibly real, and it's definitely painful, but it is not annihilation. Let's look at our final section, Section 5, Two Covenants, Two Ways. Centuries after this gritty human drama unfolds, the Apostle Paul looks back at it and interprets the whole thing as a macro-level revelation. He looks right past the familial dispute and identifies two entirely different ways of relating to the divine. He sees Hagar as representing the Old Covenant, basically what is produced through our own human effort and bound by systems of obligation, structure, and constraint. Sarah, conversely, represents the covenant of promise. That's what is freely given by divine intervention, totally unconstrained by human capacity, and defined by true freedom. It brilliantly contrasts what we can manage to arrange ourselves versus what God miraculously provides. Ultimately, this story distills the greatest tension in human life into these two opposing paths. It's not simply a basic battle of good versus evil. It's the fundamental struggle between what we furiously try to produce with our own hands versus what God has promised to freely give. Abraham himself had to navigate and live through both of these realities, the human attempt to manage the outcome and the absolute surrender to trusting the promise. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want you to realize that this ancient story strikes right at the foundation of how we operate every single day. So, the question is, will your life be built on what you can achieve through your own frantic effort and management, or on what God alone can bring into existence? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable story with me. Think on that question and take it with you.